Welcome, Kel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kia, for that wonderful introduction. And thank all of you for being here tonight. Um, as, as Kia mentioned, we have been partnering together for some time now. And we've been doing Writer to Writer and several other programs that we enjoy doing together. And I just am really happy that you all took the time to join us for tonight's program. More Than a Single Story is a Twin Cities-based organization whose mission is to position the literary arts as a catalyst for cross-cultural healing and social justice. We connect BIPOC writers with broadly inclusive communities through readings, public conversations, and writing workshops that foster insight, empathy, and literary skill building. Many thanks to Hennepin County Library and especially to Kia Vang for their continued partnership. Thanks also to the two writers who are with us tonight for Writer to Writer. We are pleased with our ongoing partnerships with Hennepin County Libraries, Friends of the St. Paul Library, the Loft Literary Center, In Black Ink, the Gibbons Collection of African American Literature, and others. And we are extremely grateful to the voters of Minnesota for grants from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, Minnesota State Arts Board, and also from support from other foundations, all of which allow us to keep our programs going. We invite you to visit our website or sign up for our monthly newsletter to stay up to date with our events. I'm very excited about tonight's conversation partners, Mélina Mangal and Sarah Warren, two award-winning children's book authors. They're going to engage in a wide-ranging conversation about why they write for children, about how their biracial backgrounds influence their work, and also about the challenges and the joys of writing in both fiction and creative nonfiction. I would like to say more about Mélina and Sarah, but I'm going to just introduce them and then turn it over to them so they can speak for themselves. Mélina Mangal writes picture books, biographies, and short stories that focus on connections with nature and culture. She is the author of many books, including The Vast Wonder of the World, biologist Ernest Everett Just, winner of the Carter G. Woodson Award, and other books that you can find on her website and that also ran through our slideshow. Sarah Warren is a former preschool teacher, and she loves to share stories about cool women who use their everyday powers to change the world. She's written many picture books about these women, including Dolores Huerta and Stacey Abrams and Charlotte Nebres and others. Sarah co-hosts community picture book exhibits at the Midtown Farmers Market and at the Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. She lives in Minneapolis with her family. So welcome, Mélina and Sarah, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks so much for having us be part of this program, Carolyn. And I want to thank you for all the organizing, curating, and inspiring through More Than a Single Story series. There's Writer to Writer series and all of the other programs that you have founded. I also appreciate how you always welcome new writers through these programs and through groups like the Twin Cities Black Women's Writing. And thank you to Kia Vang and the Hennepin County Library and all of you for being here tonight. I'm so excited to be in conversation with Sarah Warren this evening. And Sarah, why don't you start, just tell a little bit of a backstory about your book, the book that you wanted to talk about tonight.
Sure. So we are going to start off. First of all, I have to say a thank you too. I just want to say thank you, especially to Carolyn, who I'm a huge fan of. And I also want to thank, so if you've never gone to an event that's featuring children's book writers before, you may not know this, but the children's lit community is so supportive and amazing. And I'm looking at the people here and the children's lit folks showed up. So thank you so much, friends. It makes me feel so good. So I'm going to start with the talking. We're both going to do a little bit of reading and a little bit of kind of talking about our backgrounds as authors. And I'm going to tell you the story of a picture book biography that I started over 10 years ago. It's not published yet. I'm going to read a little bit of a version of that book that I ultimately abandoned because a lot can happen in 10 years. I think I grew a little bit as an author and as a writer, as a human, and I'm going to talk about that. And I think the publishing world, especially in children's literature, changed around me, and that had an impact on what I could get away with as an author. So I'm going to share my screen, and then ooh, it's working. Look at this. Okay, not many slides. All right, so I'm gonna give you a little background about this book. So this is a picture book biography that I started writing about Majora Carter. And Majora grew up in a neighborhood called Hunts Point. It's in the South Bronx. She grew up in the 1970s. And it's a place where redlining by banks and highway construction and landlords setting fire to their properties to collect insurance had just caused this economic degradation. And I found out about Majora in 2013 because my debut picture book had just come out, and I had been asked to do this keynote talk for a big educator conference, and I was so freaked out. I hate public speaking, so I bought this book, Talk Like TED, because I thought, oh, this will make me a brilliant public speaker and everyone will like me. And this book gave all these examples of really phenomenal TED Talks, and one of them was by Majora Carter. It's called Greening the Ghetto. So I watched Majora's talk, and in it, she described how there was this huge waste treatment plant that was planned for her neighborhood that already handled more than 40% of the city's commercial waste, New York City's commercial waste. It had a sewage treatment pelletizing plant, a sewage sludge plant, 4 power plants, and the world's largest food distribution center. And so she talked about how she and her neighbors and her community stopped that new facility, and they raised over $3 million to create the South Bronx's first waterfront park in more than 60 years. So it was an incredible achievement. I was like, this would make a great book. Majora Carter is phenomenal. I'm going to find her and I'm going to ask her permission so I can write her biography. And I did it. I found Majora. I asked for her permission. Whoa, that. And then, wouldn't that be great? Oh, and then 10 years happened. And like I said, a lot happened in those 10 years. So I was able to meet with Majora. I was able to ask her a lot of questions about her life. I was able to meet part of her family. I was able to have a picnic with her in Hunts Point Riverside Park. I was able to send out my manuscript, her story, to publishers, or my agent did. And I was able to get a lot of rejections. And they were like the best kind of rejections. I'm sure everyone here who's an author has had these rejections before, you know, like, I love the writing. It's a really important story. You know, they thought Majora was so fascinating and interesting and astonishing and wonderful. But I kept hearing over and over again that her story wasn't relatable. I disagreed because I knew people, including myself, who could relate to her story and who could relate to the situation that she and her community faced. So I kept trying, and eventually a publisher was interested. And she said, you know what, I love this story. It's such an important story. I love Majora. I love your writing, but will you revise the story and make it fiction? Will you retell the story from the perspective of a little girl who faces the problems Majora is facing and solves them, who builds a park, but only she does it as a young person. And I thought about it, and I said, yes, I will totally do it. I will do whatever you say. Just please publish my book. And so I got to work because I was feeling a little desperate. And so I tried to tell the story, Majora's story, and I talked to Majora about it before I tried. But I tried to tell it from the point of view of a girl who lived in this environmental justice community, who lived in this place that had been devastated by this vicious urban planning, these terrible policies, and who was able to imagine and build a park. So I'm going to read you this attempt. I'm going to show it to you too, so you can see all my little edits. Here we go. Okay. This dog I know is always in the street, no leash. I wonder if it will get hit, because all day long trucks huff in and out. Their puff, puff, puff makes me wheeze and cough and hold my breath. I shut my window so I only smell our supper on the stove. People say my neighborhood is ugly. Those trucks haul in a whole city's worth of garbage. We pile it up, we bury it, We burn it. I close the curtain and beat my brother at checkers until he has to go to work. People say my neighborhood is scary. Mom says when people don't have anything better to do, they cause trouble. I don't like trouble. People say my neighborhood is poison. When the buildings bake and shimmer in the sun, their black tar tops melt and make each breath a burn. My dad keeps it shady inside. He lets me suck ice cubes, and once I rubbed one on the back of my neck until it melted down to nothing. People say my neighborhood is dying. Nobody wants to move in. Empty homes get burned down. My family lives here. So do my friends. I live here. I hear there's a river. I don't see a river. I only see buildings and lots and places I do not enter. I hear there's a river. This neighborhood has a river. Imagine. A neighborhood with a river could have a park. Okay. So, whoops, not showing you that yet. So it was a start. Like I had a beginning. I felt like there were sparks there. And then so I kept up with the revision for some time. But these questions started nagging me. You know, I started to lose sight of who I was writing for. I wasn't so sure anymore. I started to wonder, like, who was it that I was trying to make Majora's story relatable to? You know, and like, what did relatable mean when I was writing about a person in a community that had been dehumanized by our media for so long? You know, like Majora and her community had been made unrelatable on purpose, so that the injustice that they were living with could seem like it was their fault. And I just started to feel really uncomfortable with this revision I was doing, but I kept trying because I really wanted to publish the book. And then my feelings of uncomfortability were amplified because all these picture books started coming out on the market, all these picture book biographies. There's all these series books that were like, you know, little heroes can do amazing things, where they would show, and if I know that there's some people in my writing groups here, and I know that you've heard me whine about this before, so I'm sorry you're having to hear this again. But you know, there are these series that would showcase like heroes of mine, like Rosa Parks and Maya Angelou, people that, you know, were on this pedestal in my heart. And they would tell these pretty conventional cradle to grave picture book biography stories, but they would illustrate the main characters, these giants, as like, they would infantilize them. So they would show them, you know, with kind of these bobble heads and sort of these big eyes, and, you know, they'd make them look really adorable and hyper relatable. And I just felt offended by it. Like, I felt like these women that I admired so much couldn't do the things that they'd done and change the world and be adorable. Like, they weren't considered adorable when they did that. They weren't very relatable. And Majora really wasn't either. And I worried that I was doing a version of that. So I was really struggling and I felt stuck. And my ego was still like, Sarah, you can do this. You can do this. If you're talented enough, you can pull this off. But I was just kind of getting blocked. And then this really magical thing happened, which is that I turned 40. And, you know, I am a Black mixed person. And I think I've spent a lot of my life trying very hard to be relatable and trying very hard to be friendly and inoffensive and so nice. And I think now I was just like, I got old enough so that I just didn't feel like it was so much my job anymore to be relatable. And I thought maybe the world could just try a little harder. And I think that gave me the courage to think, well, maybe the publishing world could try a little harder too when they considered their readership. You know, maybe they could think about the young readers who would identify with Majora's life and her work, and not just those who didn't. And so I decided not to go forward with that fiction version of the story. And I rewrote the book as a biography, again, about Majora. And years went by and nobody bought it. And I tried to stay positive. And I'm going to read just a tiny bit of kind of the next evolution as it turned back into a biography. So this version is called Majora's Neighborhood Says Get Out. And this starts with a quote by Majora Carter, which is, "If you're told from your earliest days that nothing good is going to come from your community that is bad and ugly, how could it not reflect on you?" Majora's neighborhood baked buildings sweaty hot, rooftops sizzled, the tar stank. Majora's neighborhood grumbled and honked. Trucks infected the air. Classmates caught a cough only medicine could stop. Majora's neighborhood was a dump. Hospitals burned bandages and syringes. The city hauled in sewage and trash. Trucks ditched rubble in piles so high she couldn't see the river. There was so much garbage. Was Majora garbage too? Okay, so I'm so glad nobody bought that version of the book because another magical thing happened to me as I was working on this revision for years, which was that I had a child. And as my child started to grow, I started sharing all these books with him to expand his awareness of other people and cultures that he wasn't familiar with yet. And I discovered that if he read a book that was about someone that didn't share his background, and if the story began in a problem or like in a traumatic moment in that character's life, he would either pity that main character or he would disconnect from the book. And I think he just felt like it wasn't something that could happen to him, that was their problem. And I realized, I didn't want to do that with this story. I didn't want to tell the story like how I probably would in real life, where if I was Majora Carter, I would complain about all the bad stuff and then I would brag about all the stuff I'd done, to fix things. I felt like I couldn't start with the problems that Majora and her community faced as the inciting incident of the book, which is something I kind of did. I started with problems when I was writing other things. I really needed to figure out how to show that hum of everyday humanity that existed in Majora's community and also in her life. And I had done a good job of showing that in her life, but not in the broader community of Hunts Point, which was a complicated place with complicated people. And I don't know, maybe that's what these original editors that were saying my book wasn't relatable, maybe this is what they meant. I kind of don't think it was, but I revised my biography again. And after living in rejection limbo for a couple more years, another amazing thing happened, which is that the publishing world changed. Organizations like We Need Diverse Books and other voices, finally broke through with this call for a more pluralistic and multiracial and multicultural literary landscape. And I think my book just became more marketable. So 2 years ago, I'm not sure if my math is right on all the 2 years I gave you in this, but a couple years ago, I sold this book to Lee and Low Books, which is a publisher I wanted to work with throughout my entire career. They're a family-run, minority-owned, independent publisher, and my editor is Candace Costin, who grew up in the Bronx. I've got Majora reading my drafts, and I know we're going to find a fantastic illustrator, and I am so relieved. And I'm not going to read where we're at now because I promised Candace I wouldn't, but I'm so proud of this book. And I'm so proud of what it's going to be. And I'm actually kind of glad it took so long for me to get to this place because, I think I needed to grow up a little bit to be able to write this story. So that is my share. Mélina, it is your turn.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's just illuminating to hear your process in this journey. And I really can't wait to read about Majora Carter when the book comes out. It's going to be really important for kids to read about, especially all the how you made it so vivid and the sensory details that you included to just bring it to life for kids. So can't wait. What I wanted to share this evening, some of my Jaden series books. My backstory is a little bit different. So like you, I also write biographies, but my latest works are fiction. And so my writing still tries to focus on connecting nature and culture. And with the Jaden books, I'm trying to just do that. It was the winner of the first Black Voices in Children's Literature contest, which is a unique collaboration between Strive Publishing, which was founded by Mary Terrace. It's a local Black-owned publishing company, and a partnership with Free Spirit Publishing, which is also a local independent publishing company here in Minnesota. And that was with Kira Ostendorf. And so you had mentioned this with publishers. I mean, it's definitely publishing has changed and is changing, but I also feel like we have opportunities to work with different publishers. I really wanted to enter this contest in support of Strive because of what Mary was trying to do and what she is accomplishing and the voices that she's trying to highlight and amplify. So so I was thrilled when I won the contest, and that's how Jane's Impossible Garden came into being, is a book. But it first began a long time ago in the early 2000s. It started with a spring walk in one early spring evening. With like a lot of my stories, it started with a sound. I hear things a lot better than I see things. And I heard something that really intrigued me. And I kept hearing it, but my husband didn't. I'd stop and listen. And to me, it was very audible. And so I started thinking about, if I were a kid, what I would do with that, what I would try to find out, how I would try to learn more about it. And through that lens, I thought, well, this is the sound of spring nights. But I found out later through some research that it was actually the sound of worms, which was just amazing to me. And so the image of a little boy started coming to me, a boy who could hear the worms where people around him couldn't, and a boy who noticed these other elements of nature that others overlooked. And so I started writing that. And I was born in Bordeaux, France, which is wine country. And I remind myself every once in a while that good work takes time. And like a fine wine, I let the story ferment a bit, actually a lot. And I do that quite a bit with most of my writing. And then life intervenes, and I had a kid too. So in between there, amazing how that happens. So I put it aside for a while, and then my kid was all of a sudden a toddler, and actually poking around and listening and observing some of the same things that I had started to write about. So I started working on it again because it just wasn't quite right. And after writing and rewriting for a while, I took a class with Maya Cristina Gonzalez through her Heart of It class. And she gave me really valuable feedback. She's an illustrator, but she taught me this mapping process and really helped me visualize and make dummies for my work that I hadn't tried to do. And in the picture book world, that's basically creating illustrations for the book to help visualize how your line breaks, your page breaks are going to play out in the text. And I had never tried any of that before, because I always thought, and I was always told, that an illustrator will do all that kind of work. You don't need to think about it. But I hadn't let myself go there in really fleshing out details. And so that really helped me bring to life my character. That's also when I realized I had several stories and not just one, because there was way too many words, too much. So I focused on the immediate need, which was showing Black and brown kids in nature, because there's a dearth of books recognizing African-American kids engaging with nature. And I thought of my childhood and how my siblings and I were free-range kids when we were very little. We lived right next to some woods, and so we were always outside. And I wanted to see that reflected in a story. But I also know that families are busy and home situations vary, and many kids live, like we were just hearing about Majora, in densely populated urban areas. And the reality is that some kids are not able to go outside as much because of space, supervision, safety issues. And there's also the notion that you have to be out in the middle of the woods in order to appreciate nature, which is just not how many of us live. So that's how the series started. And Nia, if you could cue up the manuscript, the actual slides, I wanted to read just from the beginning of the first book, Jaden's Impossible Garden. And so I don't know if we can see that up here. But let's see.
Sorry, 1 second, just queuing it up.
Okay. And because it's a picture book that is out there, I thought it'd be fun to actually see what it looks like, with the illustrations by Ken Daly. He's an amazing illustrator who lives in Canada. And he was also, he was selected by Free Spirit Publishing. They're the ones who actually ended up publishing the book. And so it's going to be just a second. There it is. Yeah, so I'm going to read just the beginning of this to give you a sense of what this book is about. So Jaden's Impossible Garden. Okay, and one second now, I have to get my copy up. Okay, so Jaden loved nature. At school, he played outside during recess. On field trips, he pretended to be a scientist, collecting acorns, stones, and twigs. In Jaden's favorite books, kids played in tree houses or climbed rocks. And turn the page. But after school, Jaden had to stay inside. There's no nature here in the middle of the city, Mama said. Jaden knew there was. On his way home, he watched squirrels scrounge for snacks. He listened to the calls of the cardinals. He felt fat, furry snowflakes as they fell from the sky and landed on his face. A wheelchair van lowered Mr. Curtis onto the sidewalk in front of Jaden's building each afternoon. He would inch forward and stop, then look around from the sky to the ground. He'd close his eyes to breathe in the cold, fresh air before wheeling in. Jaden wondered if Mr. Curtis wanted to be outside as much as he did. Every day, Jaden walked home very slowly, so he would get there just as the wheelchair van pulled up. He opened the building door wide and waited as Mr. Curtis wheeled inside. "Thank you, Jaden," said Mr. Curtis. Mr. Curtis was outside one day as Jaden walked up. "What are you looking at?" Jaden asked. "That crocus," Mr. Curtis said. "How'd it get there?" Jaden asked with awe. "Magic," Mr. Curtis winked. "Spring is here." Jaden smiled, wanting to stay. Then his shoulder slumped. "I have to go inside. Mama says there's nothing to do out here." "My daughter says that too," Mr. Curtis nodded. "But I just want to be out all day." "Can I go outside with Mr. Curtis?" Jaden asked Mama. "He loves nature too." "What a kind idea," Mama said. "But Jaden, there's no nature here in the middle of the city." From then on, Jaden and Mr. Curtis met every day after school. Mr. Curtis told stories of his childhood adventures in Mississippi. Jaden shared facts he'd found in animal books. They compared nature collections. They searched for anthills. They built towers from old boxes, stones, and sticks. "This is our secret fort," Jaden said. They planted mystery seeds in old containers. "This is our magical garden," Mr. Curtis said. One day, Jaden tried to share the secret. "Mama, here's the magical secret fort garden I made with Mr. Curtis." And we can stop this right now, the sharing. Thanks, Nia. So that was the first part. That was the first book, Jaden's Impossible Garden. And of course, what follows is a little bit of an adventure in the yard and with some of the things that they create. So the worms didn't make it into the final story, but the boy and his excitement for nature did. And as with Mr. Curtis in the story, many African-American elders, like my father and his siblings, grew up spending most of their time outside, keenly aware of the elements and the seasons. However, during the Great Migration, many African-Americans left the South, severing ties to the land, wanting to get as far away from the harshness of segregation as possible, only to end up in restrictive and populous cities, often without green space. Mr. Curtis connects Jaden to historic African-American involvement with nature. He remembers his youth in Mississippi, like my dad, and connection to the land, and shares his knowledge and experience, which includes gardening and appreciating the creeping, crawling, and flying beings in our world as well. And like Jaden, he recognizes that nature isn't always just a lush forest out the back door. Nature is the nest under the eaves or hidden below piles of autumn leaves. It's bursting out of cracks in the sidewalk or climbing on brick walls. Sounds of nature echo through market stalls. Jaden and Mr. Curtis invite nature into their world. I wanted to show how adults can get bogged down in all that they do, which is a reality, and the restrictions that they may have, but also how young people can help them rekindle those connections to nature and to imaginative play as well. I wanted Jaden to inspire young readers with his love of nature, but I also wanted him to be inspired by the books that he reads and to enjoy fantasy nature play. It's great to see Black and brown kids just having fun, being out in nature, creating. So the second Jaden book morphed out of that first long manuscript I'd written years earlier. The basic idea had been there, but several factors had changed how I approached the story. The recent statistic that 50% of kids in the United States do not eat vegetables on a daily basis, according to the CDC, really struck me as a call to action. I thought of the excitement of the kids I work with through my volunteer work with the Children's Peace Garden and the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance, and how excited they were to harvest their vegetables. And I remember seeing how much kids really loved the fresh fruits and veggies they'd get through a snack through our public schools, through the Fresh Fruits and Veggies program. And then I remembered my own epiphany when I first had delicious fresh green beans. So I wanted to follow the story of the plants to help kids understand how some of their produce is grown and how they can grow and prepare their own. So if we could clue up the slides again, I'm going to read just a little bit from the second book, the sequel. And that's my latest book, Jaden's Secret Ingredient, which came out in August. So if we could pull that one up. It's the same slide, just where
The
we left
same
off.
one. Okay.
Yeah, just where we left off.
Perfect. 1 second here.
And
Oh no, this is the right. I apologize.
it's okay. Things don't always pop up the way we want them to.
And starting at the end of it.
Well, it's right where we left off. So you can probably just zip through from the beginning again, or
I'm sorry, from the beginning?
well, that's we can zip through, it's midway through the slides. It's where he left off.
Oh, okay. I see
Yeah.
what you're saying. I apologize.
That's okay. It's
Mhm.
where there was the about the author section, and then it was about to start the second part.
Okay.
Had my little filler there to separate them. So and so it's amazing how seeing the kids at school, I work in a school as a school librarian, but seeing how excited they are to get fresh fruits and veggies as a snack. And it's a program that's not in every school, but it's amazing to see how much the kids really like it, tasting some different things and veggies and fruits that they don't always get. There it is. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So yeah, so this is the second book that just came out. This is Jaden's Secret Ingredient. So I'll read just a little bit from that, give you a sense of where this is going. Jaden watched a hummingbird sip nectar from the blossoms of the scarlet runner beans. He planted the vine with his neighbor, Mr. Curtis, and it was growing strong. Morning, Jaden, Mr. Curtis said as he entered the yard. Can you help me reach some beans? Sure. Jaden trotted over and started picking. You want the flowers too? We let the flowers be. They become beans. What are you going to do with all these? Jaden plucked some more and handed them to Mr. Curtis. Jaden, my boy, we're going to eat them. Not me. I don't like green beans. Mr. Curtis shook his head. You never had these. Tell you what, come over Sunday and I'll show you how to cook the best beans in the world. All that day, Jaden thought about Mr. Curtis's invitation. He liked carrots and peas and Mama's coleslaw and collard greens, but how could he get out of eating scarlet runner beans? Saturday morning, Jaden saw Mr. Curtis near the fence again. I'll help, Jaden called. Janice from down the hall approached with a bowl. May I pick some beans from your vine? Help yourself, Mr. Curtis said. Just save us a taste. I love to try different dishes. An idea popped into Jaden's head. If everyone else eats the green beans, then I won't have to. Take as many as you want, Shanice. Mr. Curtis smiled. That's mighty kind of you, Jaden. Jaden felt bad. Mr. Curtis didn't know what he was really thinking. Don't forget to come over with your mama tomorrow, son. You'll taste something special. Jaden didn't want to disappoint Mr. Curtis, but how could green beans taste special? Jaden almost forgot about the beans as he did his homework. He read about an adventurous scientist who traveled the world, learning about new plants. Jaden looked out his window. Bunches of beans hung from the scarlet runner vines. That's it. So he develops a fantastic idea. Thanks, Nia. That's it. And of course, to find out, you'll have to read the book. But I included a range of recipes in this book also to entice picky eaters to try something new. And there's also a nod to the amazing biology professor and dean of Grinnell College, Dr. Beronda Montgomery, who wrote Lessons from Plants, a book that I really love. So she appears as the famous scientist that Jaden reads about. And she was also the founders of Black Botanist Week during the pandemic, which I had a chance to participate in. And it was amazing to just meet so many plant lovers, Black plant lovers all over the world. It was fantastic. So as with the first book, Mr. Curtis is an elderly man who uses a wheelchair, but that is not the focus of the story. Through their intergenerational friendship, young readers see both Jaden and Mr. Curtis as they are, two individuals enjoying nature and green beans. So my work, I think about it as normalizing the experience of Black kids and kids of color, whether they're building with boxes outside, planting gardens with elderly neighbors, or simply reading about adventures. So we're all here going about our day to day, and children's books should reflect that. Every kid should be able to see themselves in it. Our world includes us, Black and brown people, so it should be normal to see us reflected in all media, in children's books. And to borrow Shonda Rhimes, the producer and screenwriter, I'm trying to make the world of children's books look normal, not to continually relegate us to being diverse or othered. Kids are kids the world over. They play, they dream, they explore, they wonder. And all of our students should be able to see this reality in the books that they read. So that's what I wanted to share, just starting off with about the Jaden books.
Yay! I want to snap, but my fingers are too dry. Minnesota. Oh, I love that so much. Okay, so I have a question for you, Mélina.
Yes.
As you know, I do a lot of community arts programming with my partner in crime, Catherine Erdahl, who's on this at this event. Where we share children's books, in non-traditional spaces. And so we've had the honor of sharing your two fiction picture books with readers of all ages. And your books are so unique. Not only do kids respond, but their adults do too. So whenever I share your story, I get to hear a lot of stories about neighbors and friendship and elders and trying new foods. I mean, I think your writing impacts people in a really profound way. And not just one person, but all the people. And so I wonder, like, when you sit down to write, who are you writing for?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And thank you for offering that venue. I have to say, Sarah, that's amazing. The Midtown Picture Book Parade, the story strolls are fabulous, just highlighting the work of so many wonderful writers here in the Twin Cities. But also, everybody, Sarah has gotten this amazing display at the Twin Cities airport where thousands of people passing by every day can see the work of Twin Cities artists, of picture book authors. So it's amazing. Thank you for that. So I write for my kid. Well, I was writing for my kid. My kid just turned 18. And so I began writing. I won't say began writing for her, but for my nephews and nieces as well. They're older, and when they were coming around, I really thought about what they would need. I write for my students as well. I've been a school library teacher for a long time in schools, had lots of students, so I think about them and some of the students that I met. And I write for the kid I used to be also. I feel like I have a deep respect for children and the natural world, and I'm thinking about both when I write. But so much of what I write stems from my childhood. When I was little, we moved around a lot because my dad was in the military. And so we often moved in the middle of the year. And so all of a sudden I'd be in a completely different environment with kids who'd been together for a while. So I write for the new kid as well. I'm thinking about that person who was like me. And I'd been living in small towns in the upper Midwest, like the upper peninsula of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, where there were few Black and mixed families like mine. We stood out. My family and I experienced a range of violent, racist acts. We became fierce protectors of each other because of that. And my parents and family instilled a sense of pride in my African American and French heritage, but I didn't feel that validation outside our home. I felt too visible as the brown skinned person and also invisible as an important person with a strong culture and connection to nature. So when my family moved to St. Paul from a small town in Wisconsin after fifth grade, my world expanded significantly in all ways, but especially literary. So I participated in a summer reading program at the Lexington Branch Library, which is now Rondo Library. And I discovered autobiographies by people like Josephine Baker, and who was a dancer and performer, and Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou. They were all artists who were African American, but had a connection to France like me. So seeing their books prominently displayed made me acutely aware of what I'd been missing, books by and about other Black people. And that's when the idea of becoming a writer first occurred to me. And I began chronicling my feelings in a journal, in a diary, kind of like Langston Hughes. And I wrote poetry, we'll call it that, even though at the time I don't think it really was poetry. But I was writing then mostly for me. Writing was an outlet. It was a way to vent and explore ideas. And then after college, I actually started submitting poems and short stories and getting them published. And I started taking writing classes seriously also through the Loft. But I became a librarian. I decided to pursue librarianship. And in graduate school, I was introduced to these amazing authors like Mildred Taylor, Virginia Hamilton. And I was just blown away because as a kid, I hadn't seen brown characters like them. But here I was finding them. Not only did they look like me, but they shared the same interests in cultural identity, history, folklore, and the environment. And I thought, where were your books when I was young? If they'd have been available in the school libraries I'd been in, I hadn't seen them. So I was sad that I'd missed out on those books, but it also made me feel like I have a role here. I can write for other kids like me. And so even though I was trying to pursue more adult writing at that time, I became a school librarian. And so I was surrounded by kids all day, and my focus shifted dramatically to almost exclusively thinking about writing for kids. That's also when my siblings started having their kids. And so kids were very much, in the front of my mind. And what I was thinking at that time was just, and seeing that they really needed to see themselves as well, because things had been changing, but they needed to see more scientists and other writers and seed collectors and creative problem solvers. And those types of people have always been with us throughout our history, but we've still hadn't really seen them reflected in our books. But that's when I decided to write about Ernest Everett Just, because I discovered him when my kid was in kindergarten. And I thought, he was doing his work in the early 1900s. Like, why hadn't I ever heard of him? But he was a groundbreaking Black scientist, and he taught other scientists how to study marine animals and their natural environment without harming them, and really worked with nature instead of trying to subdue nature, which is a really important focus of mine. So thinking about my teen years is also what prompted me to write my latest short story, which came out in the anthology Boundless. I wrote a story called Michelle and Yvette and Kaiserslautern. And it's about two sisters living in Europe during the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster, and how they navigate their identities as young biracial and bicultural people. One of them is getting to know French culture, while the other one finds herself immersed in the African American culture of being a transplant in the military. I wrote the story I would have loved to read when I was a teen, when I was younger. And I see this just as important today, especially when we look at climate change and our role in it and what we can do. So that feeling of what I grew up that was missing stays with me. But I'm trying to counter that by continuing to write. But I feel like I'm writing in service to nature also, and service to Mama Nature. So kind of a lot about who I write for, but what about you? I mean, who do you see yourself as writing for?
Well, I think, when I started out, I started out as an educator like you, and I was writing for my students. I was a preschool teacher. I'd been doing the work for quite some time, and I saw that my students were obsessed with superheroes, and I wanted to introduce them to real life heroes and leaders, that had real powers, and heroes that looked like them, that looked like me, that looked like the important people in their lives. And those books didn't exist. And so I started out just writing for my classroom, which was so perfect for me. Like my target audience was so precise. Like I knew the names, I knew the faces, I knew the parents. And that was so good as a way to start. I really understood their development. And it was also really good for me when I did start to think about publication, because I had a really tangible mission. Like I wanted to introduce kids to diverse heroes and leaders. And so it may be a little bit rejection proof in the beginning, because I was kind of high and mighty, like I had this sort of righteousness going into the industry. And I think the problem with that was that I saw my books as kind of like a medicine, like I had the cure for something, which is kind of the opposite of what you want in a kid's book. I think you don't want your book to taste like medicine. So, so I think I've tried to change and grow from that place. And now I try to think more about me, and what I was attracted to in stories when I was young, because there weren't any kids' books that I knew of that featured characters that look like me. But my parents and my dad and my grandmother in particular kind of inundated me with media kind of celebrating Black excellence. I right now I identify as Black mixed, but when I was growing up, it was like Black or passing for white. So like I grew up very proud of my Blackness and my Black history. And so, in looking at all that media, what is interesting to me thinking back on it is I wasn't always as like excited about the achievement of the person, but I was interested in like how they learned to do what they did, like I wanted to know what they loved, I wanted to know about the people who loved them. I wanted to know about the mistakes they made. I loved hearing about the little things that made people brave. I just loved hearing about the ideas that they had and the steps they took to pursue those ideas. And sometimes when I'm writing now, I think about, like, I think a picture book is, we're actually just using someone's life to talk to readers about those big ideas. And I'm okay with that. So yeah, I'm writing a little more for me at this point, and sometimes that doesn't go so well, but it does feel a little more authentic and real.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love how we talk about picture books being, that example as well. So,
Yeah, yeah.
well, I have another question for you. And this is based on a compliment I've heard before, which is supposedly a compliment about my writing, which was, you write really well. You could even write for adults. Well, but the implication was that anyone can write for children and I should move on to the major leagues. Why do you write children's books and how do you counter such attitudes?
Yeah, so my mom used to do that to me. She'd be introducing me to someone and she'd be like, "Yep, this is my daughter, Sarah Warren. She writes children's books, but someday she might write for adults." And I'd be like, "Thanks, Mom. Thank you so much."
Yeah.
So I think, one thing, so I'm the co-founder of Picture Book Parade. I've co-founded it with Catherine Erdahl. So we bring children's literature into non-traditional spaces. We're trying to meet readers where they are, not where we expect them to be. So we've done these story strolls once a week at the Midtown Farmers Market, where we blow up books onto signs so people can walk along and read them. We've done a year-long rotating picture book exhibit at MSB Airport. And I think those exhibits and watching people's response to them has really allowed me to figure out that this is such a powerful art form, and I need to make sure that I can do everything I can to show that to the world. Especially the airport exhibit has, like, when you blow up a picture book and put it on panels and put it on a gallery wall, like, it just changes your relationship with the art form. I think because picture books are seen as kind of a domestic art, it's used by, like, undervalued people, children and educators and, caregivers. It's not given a whole lot of respect. But when you see the book on this gallery wall, it makes you challenge that bias you have around this art. It makes you even understand that you have some bias. And I think, obviously anyone who would underestimate this art form is not paying attention to all the book banning that's focused on our industry right now. Moms for Liberty, they get it. They understand the tendency our art form has to empower people from a young age and to help them live, like, their best true lives. And I think that really scares them. I just heard about what was Northfield Library just got bomb threats and had to shut down. Like, this is a very real thing. Like, people are understanding the power of what we do. So yeah, what about you? What about
Yeah,
you?
oh, just well said. Yeah, I agree with that. I think what I also think about, and you just alluded to that, is that there is power in these books for children. It's often the first encounter with literacy that children have. Um, Children's picture books, board books, the books that children are first exposed to are, that's their foundation. It's foundational for all future learning. And I don't think there's anything more important than sparking and encouraging that love of books and that love of reading. And this quote is, so often used, and you've heard it too, but I really believe this, that Frederick Douglass quote, once you learn to read, you will be forever free. And just sparking that imagination, that connection with books as a positive thing is, I don't think there's anything more satisfying and important. And I think, what some people, the impression that some people have is that it's very simplistic, easy to do. And
Right.
I think, certainly we want people to feel the core of what we're trying to say more easily. And we spend a lot of time working on those books, but we're writing for several audiences at the same time. We have to, first of all, get our books past the gatekeepers. We have to get our books to appeal to editors, agents, and then ultimately parents and teachers or other caregivers who buy the book. So we have to appeal to adults first. And then children have to ultimately enjoy what we write as well. So there's a lot of thought and care that goes into writing. It might be a 400-word book, and those words are precious. They're counted, they're thought over, they're worked over. It's like a poet, like poetry. There's so much care and work that goes into that. And so I think that, that's one of the things I think of when people think, oh, it's so easy. It's like, well, I hope that it looks easy. That's because maybe we've been working at it for a long time. But I think also especially with picture books, but also just books for the young, but they serve as a blueprint for how young kids can engage in the world. It gives them ideas and it expands their mind for so many different things, but also for their caregivers. As a parent, just reading some of these books gave me so many ideas for how to deal with things, and some of the challenges of parenting and dealing with things that kids will encounter. I mean, it can be fun things like making a thunder cake when there's lightning and thunder, and kids are super afraid of that. My friend Mari, librarian friend who was here, had introduced me to Patricia Polacco and that whole idea. But or books like Augie Mura's Saturday, about salvaging a day that doesn't go as planned. So there's so many ideas that can be discussed around a good book and picture books. And also, I write short stories. They are a real palatable way for reluctant readers to engage with reading. They get a real connection with some, hopefully and possibly, deeper themes, while also absorbing and understanding how stories work. It helps kids develop language, and a love of language. And so I like how especially picture books can be a real springboard to deeper, bigger ideas. Like in my book, The Vast Wonder of the World, Ernest Everett Just, it's, kids can learn about how cells are first created, how a cell works. But it also helps you deal with those difficult topics like racism, like natural disasters, like death, like separation in a family. So there's so many things that go into a book for kids that really help them, dig into and understand the world better. So
Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
Okay, I have another question for you.
Mhm.
You mentioned your beautiful book, The Vast Wonder of the World. And, this is such an incredible work of creative nonfiction. It's so accurate. It's so well researched. It's so true, and it feels so true. You are such a phenomenal nonfiction writer, and you're also a fiction writer. And as I've said before, I've shared your books in story times before. And so I've seen firsthand of how children engage with your writing. You're so good at both things. So how do you toggle back and forth between writing fiction and nonfiction? Do you have a separate process for each, or is it the same?
I use a similar process, and thank you very much for that. But my process is similar, but the order in which I do things is reversed. So for both fiction and nonfiction, I typically start with free writing, just all the ideas that come to my head for a story or for a biography, for example. But for a biography, what that tends to end up as is a list of questions. And then with a biography, I tend to spend a lot of time researching then who this person was. I want to know everything about them. And I love research. I just feel like I'm a detective that's unearthing, really cool old documents and sources. So I love that process. And sometimes I get a little distracted with that process and think I need to look up their family tree and find out about generations before them. So I can get carried away, but then I do that research. And then what I typically do, and I do this for fiction too, is I start trying to get into the head of my subject or my character. And that happens with poetry. So I start trying to write poetry from that person's perspective or the people around them. But that also helps me pinpoint some of the holes, some of the things that I'm missing that I might need to go back and do more research for. So that's kind of how I start with nonfiction. And with fiction, it's a little bit more reversed. I'll just start writing, maybe doing poetry. And that's when I realize I don't know enough about worms, or I don't know enough about scarlet runner beans. And then I'll do a lot of research and get distracted doing research for that process and then try to rein it back in. But for me, it's equally fun. Although the research part of writing biographies and nonfiction is probably even more appealing to me. So, and you too, you've written a number of biographies, but you also write fiction as well too. So how do you shift and make that transition, toggle back and
Yes,
forth?
it does feel a little different for me because when I'm doing a biography, I'm like marinating in the research. Like it sounds like you do too, where I'm just listening to everything, I'm reading everything, I'm watching everything. You know, I'm completely just inundating myself in all of this information, and I'm looking for kind of those seeds. You know, I'm looking for in childhood, you know, where were the seeds planted of, you know, that curiosity or that, you know, that passion, that confidence that we're going to see later as this achievement that maybe we celebrate as a community. And, you know, I often try now to reach out to the person I'm working with so I can ask them questions. When I first got started, I was told never reach out to the person you're writing about. Don't try to ask for permission. Too many cooks in the kitchen. And you know, just don't slander them. But now, you know, I think you can have a much richer story if you can have that contact. And then, you know, I look for support structures within that person's life. I look for, you know, mistakes that they made. I look for their human beingness because I think that's such an important part of the story. And then once I feel like I've got everything I can that I can get, I try to figure out that emotional through line, you know, that's going to lead the reader through the story, which can be really hard because if I'm in love with someone, like everything feels like an emotional through line to me. Like knowing when to start and stop can be so hard. And when I'm writing fiction, I think I marinate more in me, which is a lot less research, but it takes a lot more confidence. I'm very weird, my sensibilities, I think, and I spend a lot of time in my life trying to pass for not weird. And I think children's lit, like it can be a really safe place to hide your voice, which maybe is a weird thing to say, but it can be really prescriptive. It can be really audience oriented because you're thinking about, you know, you're writing for somebody else's child, you know, you're thinking about word count and vocabulary, and you're thinking about child development. So the experience of the reader, I think can sometimes take priority, or you can let it take priority over your experience as an artist. So as I move into writing more fiction, because I published one fiction picture book, I'm kind of trying to trust my weirdo voice a little bit more. And somebody who's given me a lot of confidence there is old Tyler Perry, which stay with me here. I don't know. So when I was in my 20s, my friend Felicia and I went to an event at Theodore Wirth Park, and there was a person who had a table, and he was selling Tyler Perry DVDs. And I don't know if anyone else is familiar with these, but Felicia told me to buy one that I would love it, and she was totally right. And these were like old morality plays. I don't know if anyone else has seen these, but they were like these stage shows, and they were so earnest. Like, and I watched them, and I was like, there's another Black theater person out there. Like I just didn't like, it felt like such an epiphany to me because most of the like Black media I was consuming at the time, this was like the 2000s, like the people were comedians and in sitcoms, and everyone was so cool and so funny and so hip and everything. And this was not cool. It was not funny. It was so corny, and I loved it so much. And I felt like, okay, so you can just be like yourself. Like you can do your weird thing. You can be so different. And some other little weirdo out there is going to see this, and they're going to feel so much less alone in the world. And so I think right now I'm just trying to engage that like little inner weirdo voice and get it down on paper. And that's just going to be like my little message in a bottle that I throw out to some other weirdo out there, and hopefully they'll read it. So
Just a unique voice. Unique is the word, not weirdo.
there we go. There we go.
This is such a lovely, powerful conversation, you guys. And Sarah, I've stopped trying to pass for a weirdo. Trying, you know, I think as writers, we're weirdos. But I would love to open it up for questions now. So let's see, Nia, if you want to like open the whole screen. And If anyone has a question, you can either put it in the chat. There you go. Hawana said it. Weirdos unite. Writers, weirdos.
Yeah.
Yes. But yes, you can either put your questions in the chat, or if you'd prefer to speak them out loud, go right ahead. Questions or comments? Nia, can you open the screen, please? So that we're all, I guess the gallery view is what I'm looking for. Well, all right. Do you guys have questions? Well, let me ask about, I just want to say, I'm really excited to hear that Lee and Lowe has accepted the Majora Carter book. I can't
Yes.
wait to see it. And I'm so happy that you persisted. And even though it's been difficult and you wanted to give up, in fact, you did give up several times, but you came back to it. And it just, just makes me happy that, that all writers should really be, that should never give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's
I
see.
want to thank you for this fabulous conversation, but I think I saw some questions in the chat, maybe.
Oh, good. Did you? All right.
There is one. I see one that says, what are you working on next? So, you want to answer that first, Sarah?
Weird stuff. No, I am. Again, my writing group out there. I've been working on a lot of fiction. I've been taking a break. I'm still in revision with the Majora book. I have another picture book biography about Marla Spivak, who's a local entomologist that I'm going to be revising soon. And then I have 2 more celebrity biographies that are under review right now. We'll see what happens with them. And yeah, but mostly I'm kind of enjoying working in fiction and just writing very weird little stories that I force my writing group to read and give me feedback on. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. I'm working on another picture book biography. And this next one I'm super excited about because I'm working with the poet Sun Young Shin with. And it is a biography of a couple. And that will be coming out next year, at the beginning of next year, I believe. And so it's really been fun having this collaborative effort, this collaboration. And I'm, stepping into poetry a little bit too, writing in verse. So super excited about that. And I am writing some board books also. So I'm going even younger and writing some nature-based board books that I'm thrilled about. And then I have a couple of picture books, fictional picture books too, that I'm hoping will find a home. They're out there looking for a publisher. And then I'm also somehow trying to write a middle grade book. And I say trying because, I haven't been super successful with that yet. I've written a couple of manuscripts in the past, but I've been really drawn towards writing something for slightly older. So hopefully, something might come of that too.
Okay, there's a question from Sherry. You both are deep into your careers of writing for children. Can you both talk about your evolution and revising your work from the beginning until where you are now?
Yeah, I used to be a lot more superficial in my revising. And then I mentioned that I'd taken a class with Maya Cristina Gonzalez with picture books. That has been especially helpful because it's really helps me hone my visual acuity, I guess, and to look at more page breaks and really exactly where a word will fall on a page. And so I think for some reason, I just didn't let myself go there before as much with the visual thing, because I know I can't see very well. I've always had problems with that, but I've given myself more permission to spend time with that. And then I do a lot more reading aloud and recording myself and listening back. And so that my revision for picture books has definitely deepened, and I spend a lot more time on that. And I'm using a lot of those same tools now with longer forms as well. So I used to want to just kind of zip through things and then pass it off to someone else to give me feedback. And now I'm really taking the time and trying to spend a lot more time on my own first, to really get to know it better, know what I need to do.
I think I've had a similar journey in that editors have asked me lately to paginate my manuscripts, which before you were never supposed to do. You know, like that was like you never got to anticipate the layout of the book. You could maybe make a mock-up, you know, yourself, but I just didn't usually bother to do that. And that's really helped me to sort of think about the illustration a lot more and the play between the illustration and the words. And be a lot more generous, maybe too generous. I have to use a lot of illustration notes now in my writing. But I think I've also changed in my ability to accept feedback. I think, like I said before, I kind of had a real chip on my shoulder when I came into this industry. And which was good because it gave me that courage, but it also made it really hard for me to accept feedback. And I'm working with the Mirrors and Windows program at the Loft right now. It's a program that supports emerging children's literature writers. And one thing that I told the fellows is, you know, when I first started taking classes, there weren't a lot of other people that looked like me. And there weren't a lot of other people that had stories that, you know, acknowledged the existence of race and class. And people weren't writing about the same subjects I was writing about. And so I got a lot of feedback that didn't match my intent or my vision. So, you know, people would sometimes say my work was edgy or challenging, or like, you know, I was encouraged to look for publishers that published books about issues. And I was like, my work seemed confrontational when I'm like, that's the last thing I wanted my work to be. And I didn't feel like an issue, and I didn't feel like the people I was writing about were issues either. And so I think I kind of developed a thicker skin maybe than I needed to in the beginning, because I didn't know which feedback to trust. And but I also felt very insecure and I really second guessed myself a lot. So I was a little bit of a mess. So I think a part of it is just like feeling more comfortable, like being able to, like, you know, like sit with myself and try to trust myself, but also finding people that I can trust to give me feedback, and just learning to trust it, you know, like, and knowing that I don't have to have that wall up. Yeah. So.
All right, there are two more questions. Joe, I believe you had your hand up. Maybe you put it down. Did you have a question, Joe Birsch?
Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you too, Joe. It's
See you,
great to
Joe.
see you. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
I love how you come to all these book events. This is great. And congratulations, I heard you wrote a book too. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
thank you.
And then Hawana wanted to know about groups, about writing groups, which Sarah, you just touched on. Would you talk a little bit about how you became involved with and found the right community or communities for you and your work?
So I found my first writing group through the Loft. So I just found other people that you know, in class and through workshopping. One of my people's here right now. Hey, Kathy. And I've got other people too here, writing group folks. And so taking classes, I think if you're a children's lit person, you know, showing up for things like Picture Book Salon and, you know, other events and venues where you can find like-minded people who are trying to do the thing you're trying to do. I think there are a lot of people who are eager to get feedback. So that's just kind of how I found my people, by just kind of getting to know other children's book writers and showing up.
Yeah, I probably was a bit more I'm actually very very shy, and I had a hard time initially finding a group that I could interact with and be with. And I kind of would step out into the literary world and try to, become involved with things, and then would just kind of retreat. So that happened with a number of different groups. And then I read about your group, Carolyn, the Twin Cities Black Women's Writing, and became involved with that one. And it's for adults, but that was super helpful for me to just know that I could be with a group of other people. It was really good, I guess kind of a practice ground too, that I could actually be out there with other people and share my work, and it would be okay. And then more recently, I've become involved with, and I'm super excited about this because tomorrow is a big launch. I became involved with the Brown Bookshelf. They are a group of Black writers who highlight other Black creatives, especially during Black History Month. They partnered with Highlights Foundation and created a program called Amplify. And I was in the first cohort, and basically we ended up creating another a writing group. We were lucky enough to have a retreat this past summer at the Highlights Foundation in Pennsylvania. And actually tonight, I believe, is the last night for scholarships. If anyone's interested, the Highlights Foundation has some amazing retreats and workshops and classes too. So now we have an online group, an online presence that that I meet with. And I have an amazing agent right now, Miranda Paul, and through the Erin Murphy Literary Agency that I work with, there's some of the people, the other authors that are represented by her, started a critique group, and it's all virtual, but I'm really excited about that one too, because we're all over the world. So I'm here, but there's Canada, there's West Coast, there's Korea, there's India, and it's just this amazing group of people. The challenge is finding a time with all the time zones when we can meet, but that's pretty neat, and that's something that wouldn't have happened, of course, without the pandemic and everything switching to like we're doing now, to Zoom. But that's really allowed us to connect in a different way. So I have a local group, I've got an international group, I've got an African-American group that I'm with. So for me, I'm I couldn't be happier. So but tomorrow is the relaunch of the Brown Bookshelf. So they took a year off to reorganize. And so tomorrow is the relaunch, and the website will just start highlighting some more great creatives. So check them out.
Awesome. Wow. I'd like to ask everyone to please fill out the survey that you see in the chat there, and let us know what you think of tonight, and what you'd, I just lost you. Okay, there you are. Yeah, we really want to know how you feel about what you heard tonight, and to get more ideas from you as well. And I'd also like to announce that the Jerome Foundation's application for the Jerome Hill grants is open now until April, I believe. And it's for early career writers, children's and others, people who are between 2 and 10 years of writing. And that's sort of, how can you say that? If you took a break between those 10 years, you probably want to consider that you may still be within the guidelines. You should contact them if you are curious. And again, yeah, there it is. Nia just put it up, so you can just look on their website at some point and get more information about the Jerome Hill grants. And again, please fill out the survey for us. So we have time for maybe one more question or comment. And for all of you who have put these wonderful comments in the chat, thank you for being here. I'm so glad that you enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, we have lots of stuff going on at Morgan's Story. We have a program called Embracing Our Roots, with elder authors in conversation with younger people, not just writers, but people within all the arts. And we have our Stories Ourselves program, which we do quite often with Hennepin County Library, and also with some of our other partners, where we have panel conversations followed by writing workshops. I see a couple of people in the audience who have been involved in some of those. Thank you. And yeah, if there's any final comments, we'd love to hear them. And thank you all for coming. This was just a really beautiful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Host. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for hosting, Carolyn.
You're welcome, Joe. Thank you for being here. Looking forward to seeing your book when it comes out.
Yay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. So great to see you.
Nice to
Thank
see you
you.
too. Mélina.
Joe.
All right, good to see Marianne and Deidre and Sherry and others
Peggy.
that I know. Marianne and Marianne.
And-
All right.
And Mari Nowitz in Washington State. Thank you.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah. It's one of the great
I
things.
heard-
about you can join from anywhere.
Mélina, I've got more questions. Do you want to just take this offline and we can?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. This has been great.
This was so much fun.